Hey everyone, it's Dr. RAMANI. So here's the question of the day. Can being in a narcissistic relationship make me narcissistic? Why don't you drop your answers in the chat and let's go from there. I said the chat, I meant the comments. Okay, so can being in a narcissistic relationship make me narcissistic? Oh boy, I'm worried about that, because if that's the case, we're all in trouble. Now, I've had people say to me, I don't like myself in this relationship. Since I've been in this relationship, I'm not as patient, I'm not as nice. I don't listen to people as well. I'm kind of suspicious. Sometimes I'm even worried I might be gaslighting people. Some folks have said to me, listen, in order to get stuff done to survive, I had to learn to be a little sneaky in this relationship. And so now I feel like I'm kind of sneaky when it comes to getting my needs met. Has that happened to you? Have you ever wondered if your narcissistic relationship has made you narcissistic? People wonder, is it possible? Could narcissism be infectious? If I spend enough time around this, will I become it? It's not that simple, but I do understand why people feel this way. So let's break this down. And then I will answer the question once and for all. So first, let's start with basics here. Personality change doesn't tend to happen in a significant way. I don't care what people say. I don't really think it does. The healthier the personality, the more flexibility and adaptability it has. So a healthy personality can sort of meet a situation without being rigid, but personality tends to stick, since it's a combination of biological, temperament, and many cumulative environmental experiences. Our temperament gets shaped by our interactions with the world. But there are some exceptions to this. For example, personality could actually shift in the face of a central nervous system trauma, like a head injury or a stroke. There is some evidence of personality change following significant trauma. And yes, while our personalities evolve a little, think of them as those tectonic plates under the earth. They're always moving, but probably not enough for anyone to notice unless there's a big earthquake. So what that means is that if you had an agreeable or even just a non-antagonistic personality, you're not very likely, in fact, I'd say it's pretty darn close to impossible, that you would experience a shift to now having a narcissistic personality in adulthood simply as a function of being in a narcissistic relationship. It doesn't work that way. Second, so that takes us to what happens. In order to survive a narcissistic relationship without there being constant volatile conflict, lots of people in these relationships give in and become very flexible and adaptable. And those changes you make, the adaptations, can result in shifts in how you behave. Not necessarily your personality, but in how you behave. It may mean that you don't share your emotions as much because you learn that there's no point, or that you zone out a bit more, maybe even look mildly dissociated. But other people think you aren't paying attention, or you learn to communicate indirectly to get your needs met because that was the only way to survive in the narcissistic relationship. But another person who doesn't understand this and who is out of your narcissistic system may experience what you're doing as slightly manipulative, or at the very least as unhealthy communication. The survival skills you needed in the narcissistic relationship often don't translate to other relationships. But because of this, because of these shifts you had to make to survive, you may actually believe you're narcissistic and may have even gotten feedback from people that you've changed. I don't disagree that these relationships change us, but they don't really change our personality. They kind of change our behavior. Sometimes just understanding that the behaviors that you had to take on to survive the narcissistic relationship need to be left behind in other healthy relationships you enter. It can be very different to have to maintain two different behavioral repertoires in the world. Third, complicating all of this further, they have told you that you are narcissistic. If you hear something enough, it feels like it's true. This may really come up if you were to tell them that you suspect that they are narcissistic. This is why you never call them out. And they will weaponize that, or the narcissistic person will simply call you narcissistic because they don't like it when you set a boundary or you try to communicate with them about something that they didn't want to hear. And because many, if not most people, in narcissistic relationships are always on their back foot and wondering what is wrong with them or blaming themselves, this idea of the narcissistic person calling you narcissistic feels plausible to you and then gets internalized as maybe that's what this relationship did to me. Fourth, you may feel more distracted by your rumination or pain, so you find that you're in your head a lot. This can, as I said before, mean that, for example, you're less present in conversations with other people, or that you feel disconnected or just more focused on yourself, and that may feel selfish to you. And on top of this distraction about your rumination and pain may mean it is always top of mind to you, and that you feel like it's something that you often want to talk about. Like, oh, I got to talk about this. It's making me crazy, right? And you may feel that you're selfish because you always want to talk about this and may not be as present with other people. Many, many people in narcissistic relationships have very good self-reflective capacity. The narcissistic person has none. So you are aware that you're cut off and that you're not present and that you're preoccupied and you're worrying that maybe you're being selfish. You being distracted and ruminating about something painful doesn't make you narcissistic. It means that you're going through something. While selfishness is a big part of narcissism, narcissism is not just about selfishness. There's a lot more stuff that rounds it out, and being stuck in your head and not being present in a conversation doesn't make you selfish. Fifth, you may now feel that you're as suspicious and as untrusting as the narcissistic person in your life. One thing we consistently see across survivors is difficulties with trust. It is really hard to trust again after a narcissistic relationship, especially if the narcissistic relationships that have been in your life have spanned a lifetime. And after being betrayed or lied to or gaslighted, all of it, it's hard to believe that someone new isn't going to do this to you again. And because narcissistic relationships have their so-called good moments or might have started out really well, and you may think, I didn't see any problems in this relationship in the beginning, so now even if I meet someone decent, I wonder when they're going to turn on me. Or you may be suspicious of the generosity of someone or their vulnerability and wondering if they are running a hustle again. The expectable vigilance we see after a narcissistic relationship, that now you feel like you're suspicious in the way the narcissistic person in your life is, and you wonder, have I become like them? No, you haven't. Betrayal trauma is real. And being exposed to chronic violations of trust robs us of trust. That doesn't mean that we are antagonistic or narcissistic. It might mean that we're guarded, careful, and vigilant, and that takes time to reset. Sixth, you don't feel confident in your social interactions anymore and are sometimes concerned that you're monopolizing the conversation, and that makes you worried that maybe you're narcissistic. In general, most people in narcissistic relationships can become quite isolated. We know that. And that isolation means that you sometimes feel like you just aren't as good at being with people anymore. And on top of that, may be told that by the narcissistic person. Something that I have observed in clients and in survivors of these relationships over the years is that they sometimes find that the tape that's running through their head, the rumination, can mean that they're kind of cognitively stuck and find it hard and difficult to talk about other stuff. Not everyone who goes through narcissistic relationships experiences this, but some do. and then might feel guilty because they believe that they were being selfish just talking about what they were experiencing. That doesn't make you narcissistic. Many, if not most survivors, don't have a safe space to talk about what is happening. Most folks don't have access to a therapist who gets it. And then toss in there that you are socially isolated can mean that what is happening in a narcissistic situation in your life, whatever it is, again, is what is at the top of your mind or literally overwhelming your mind. So you want to talk about it. This is why things like support groups, therapy, places to talk about it become essential, but also wanting to talk about what is hurting you and what is confusing you doesn't make you narcissistic. Seventh, many people in narcissistic relationships will say, I feel like I'm less empathic. Like when I hear people complain about their lives and little things, I kind of don't care anymore. And sometimes even feel like I wish my biggest problem in my marriage was who empties the dishwasher on Wednesdays. Many survivors get scared that they aren't as empathic as they once were, that nowadays they have trouble listening to what feel like the smaller problems of people around them, like day-to-day stuff versus the soul-stripping invalidation that you're experiencing on the daily. You may be worn out since you're giving all of your empathy away with none coming back in, and so you feel tapped out, and then you get scared that maybe you lack empathy. Compassion fatigue and caregiver fatigue are real. And it can't be all empathy out all the time. Some has to come in to replete you. Because when it's all empathy out, you will get burned out. And yes, at those times you'll feel like you can't be bothered with other people's stuff. We can sometimes see these reactions in healthcare workers, parents, and caregivers of family members, and in people who are in relationships where it is one-sided. Your empathy is not gone, but it is a tank. It can run out. And this is why anyone that's unsupported in a caregiving role, or or anyone who's in a caregiving role or in a helping profession needs support. They need places to get empathy. And in a narcissistic relationship, that's far less likely to happen for you. But you may feel less patient with people and not be able to be present with their stuff. That doesn't mean you lack empathy, especially if you are aware that you aren't able to bring it the way you once did. Simply that awareness and that drift, awareness of the drift in your empathy differentiates you from a narcissistic person. But it simply means that you're tapped out because no empathy is coming in towards you. So the short answer to this video is no. Your narcissistic relationship cannot turn you narcissistic, but it can do a number on you that can leave you feeling more turned inward, ruminating, distracted, less socially connected, and plugged into conversations. Does that mean you are narcissistic? No. It means you're having an expectable series of reactions to what can often feel like an impossible situation. Personality rarely shifts in really significant ways. It's like a jello mold that kind of gets set by our 20s. In fact, for many of you, your flexible and often agreeable personality means that you were and are able to make shifts to yourself that a rigid narcissistic person is incapable of. So take that off your list of things to worry about. You are not becoming narcissistic because of this relationship. Thanks again.